U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein holds press conference in Beirut, citing progress in ceasefire talks. The Palestinian presidency condemns Israeli media reports about plans for a buffer zone in northern Gaza. And the U.S. Secretary of Defense announces new military aid package to Ukraine. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein has held a press conference in Beirut after a second meeting with the Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri, signaling progress in ceasefire talks between Lebanon and Israel. Hochstein announced plans to visit Israel to finalize broader ceasefire negotiations. Depending on today's developments in Lebanon, he confirmed ongoing collaboration with both Lebanese and Israeli administrations, noting progress in aligning views on the ceasefire, though some issues remain unresolved. Former Lebanese President Michel Aoun hosted U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein at his residence in Rabia for discussions on ongoing ceasefire negotiations. Joined by U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Lisa Johnson, Hochstein briefed Aoun on the progress of talks and shared ideas aimed at safeguarding Lebanon's rights. The discussions also emphasized the critical role of the Lebanese army in maintaining stability post-ceasefire. The Lebanese army has confirmed that Israeli occupation forces targeted an army vehicle on the road between Burj al-Muluk and Qalaya in southern Lebanon, killing one soldier and injuring another. This incident marks the second attack on the Lebanese army in recent days. On Tuesday evening, Israeli forces reportedly struck a military center in the southern town of Sarafand, resulting in the deaths of 3 soldiers. Lebanon has been facing mounting violence as Israeli strikes intensify, targeting key towns amid ongoing diplomatic efforts led by U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein.
Developments in Lebanon are dominated by escalating Israeli aggression and intensified diplomatic efforts following the visit of U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein. Israeli forces increased attacks in southern Lebanon, targeting towns such as Nakia, Tyre, and Arjiyun. These strikes have caused extensive destruction of infrastructure, with Israel claiming to have destroyed Hezbollah's underground facilities. The Lebanese army reported the death of a soldier in an Israeli strike on a military vehicle near the border. The violence coincided with Hochstein's visit, during which the U.S. senior advisor for energy security sought to advance discussions on a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. In meetings with Speaker Nabih Berri and Prime Minister Najib Mikati, Hochstein emphasized the urgency of implementing United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which stipulates that the Lebanese army should be the sole armed force in the southern border area. Hochstein urged Lebanese leaders to strengthen national stability and pursue reforms critical to the country's security and prosperity. He also reaffirmed the United States' commitment to supporting Lebanon, which is contingent to decisive governmental action. During a press conference, Hochstein underscored the importance of a robust and enforceable ceasefire. He criticized previous failures to fully implement Resolution 1701 and called for enhanced international and regional cooperation to stabilize Lebanon. France has supported these efforts, with President Emmanuel Macron urging Israel to avoid further harm to Lebanese civilians and infrastructure. Macron also stressed the importance of expediting a resolution to the conflict and ensuring the safety of UNIFIL personnel, who play a pivotal role in monitoring border tensions. Caught between international mediation and escalating conflict, the intensifying violence and ongoing diplomatic efforts underscore Lebanon's fragile position.
To help us better understand the ongoing ceasefire negotiations in Lebanon, we're joined from Beirut by writer and political researcher Ahmed Izzeddin. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Firstly, let's start off by asking, what message do you think that the U.S. administration intended to convey through Amos Hochstein regarding the current situation in Lebanon?
Undoubtedly, the American administration and the French government are trying to mediate when it comes to the operationalization of the Security Council Resolution number 1701, because this whole matter cannot be taken back to the Security Council, because just putting the case before the Security Council once more, this will make this whole thing seem like it's a new resolution that is going to be issued by the Security Council, and might actually make this potential resolution be jeopardized by the veto. You know, the Hochstein proposal has to do with the execution of and the enactment of this resolution 18 years after its issuance.
Okay, sir. Well, Hochstein had emphasized on the urgency for a ceasefire in Lebanon, but how realistic is this goal given the current dynamics on the ground, specifically, the bombings in central Beirut?
It's only natural for escalation to take place as long as the war has not been halted and, a ceasefire resolution has not been ratified. And in fact, no negotiation is going to happen under a blanket of fire. And so I believe that no negotiation is going to be viable unless the war has been halted first. When the two belligerent parties go back on their rigid stances and go back to the negotiation table and stop the ceasefire, then we can have a viable negotiation. I think that at this point, some deliberations and some mutual understandings could be taking place in order to operationalize Security Council Resolution number 1701.
Well, sir, as you said, this may not necessarily be viable due to, the escalations that are happening, but Hochstein is expected to fly to Israel after departing from Beirut to supposedly finalize a ceasefire deal. Do you think that Israel will receive this interaction positively from him, and will they be agreeable, or will the escalations continue?
I think that Hochstein has, engaged in a lot of deliberations in Lebanon, and in fact, a lot of deliberations took place around the hot topics, specifically as that relate to the enactment of the resolution number 1701. And, he now has an intention tonight and tomorrow to engage in other deliberations with the Israeli side. And so we'll see whether there will be a need for an additional visit by Hochstein to be paid to Israel, or whether just an agreement of a ceasefire can be just reached right away.
Okay, so sir, in your opinion, how do you think that these developments may influence the broader geopolitical dynamics within the region?
undoubtedly, we are now before a whole new phase that is unfolding. You know, the Security Council resolution was issued in 2006. I'm talking about the resolution number 1701. It has not been enacted or operationalized until this point. And so I think that the impediments that stood in the way of enacting this resolution need to be looked into with a lot of detailed deliberations in order for us to avoid the outbreak of a new war, specifically after the outbreak of the current war that is happening right now in Gaza and in Lebanon. And so I hope that these deliberations are going to bridge any loopholes in the resolution in order to avoid any further military escalations.
So, sir, how genuine do you think is the United States' commitment to Lebanon's stability as it is conveyed right now by Mr. Hochstein?
In fact, it is the different states' interests that actually answer that question. There is, of course, international interest being proven by the Hochstein visit to the countries of the Middle East. He has been trying to bring the escalation between Lebanon and Israel to a halt, but until now, nothing has been fruitful. And as well, the French side has started advancing in the same pathway, in the same track. And a lot of international community voices are now, expressing the need for a ceasefire in Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip as well, in order once more to avoid further military escalations in the region.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. That was writer and political researcher Ahmed Azzeddine. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. And now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. The Palestinian presidency has condemned Israeli media reports about plans to establish a buffer zone in northern Gaza managed by foreign-backed contractors. It described the proposal as unacceptable and a violation of international law. A Palestinian presidential spokesperson stressed that humanitarian aid and Gaza's future must be overseen solely by the Palestinian Authority in coordination with UNRWA. The spokesperson reiterated President Mahmoud Abbas's demand for an immediate ceasefire, unhindered aid delivery, an Israeli withdrawal, and full Palestinian control. The presidency emphasized that lasting peace can only be achieved by ending Israeli occupation and establishing an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Israeli occupation forces have continued their assault on Jenin and its refugee camp for a second consecutive day. Palestinian media reports that Israeli forces have raided homes and detained several Palestinians, including a woman, since early this morning. Bulldozers entered the city, destroying power lines and causing a complete blackout in Jenin. Medical sources confirm that the death toll has risen to 5 since yesterday. Two Palestinians have been killed and several others injured in shelling by Israeli occupation forces across the Gaza Strip. Medical sources confirmed that one person was killed in Jabalia al-Nazla by artillery fire, while another died in airstrikes in the Khirbet al-Atz area near the Palestinian town of Rafah. In a separate incident, several people were injured when an Israeli drone dropped a bomb near the entrance to Al-Nusayrat. Palestinian medical authorities have reported that Israeli occupation forces killed 50 people and wounded 110 in Gaza over the past 24 hours. Palestinian media outlets confirmed that at least 8 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza. Gaza-based health authorities have updated the death toll of the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip, which has now surpassed 43,900, with over 104,000 wounded. Gaza medical authorities have reported that Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia remains under a rather tight siege, with Israeli forces denying it access to medicine, food, medical staff, ambulances or essential services. The hospital is currently treating 85 injured women and children under dire conditions, with 6 critical cases in intensive care. Authorities say the situation is worsening, with 17 children showing signs of malnutrition and an elderly man that died from more severe dehydration. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has announced that the Biden administration will provide new military aid to Ukraine. The aid package, worth $275 million, is aimed at addressing critical needs in the ongoing conflict. Austin confirmed that the package will include munitions for rocket systems, artillery, and tank weapons.
Defend ourselves throughout, and you've seen multiple attacks in some cases.
President Joe Biden has approved the provision of anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine for the first time, marking another major policy shift. 2 U.S. officials reported that these mines are expected to be used by Ukraine to strengthen defensive lines within its sovereign territory, not for offensive operations in Russia. Anti-personnel mines are prohibited under the 1997 Ottawa Treaty, signed and ratified by over 150 countries, including Ukraine. This decision comes just days after the U.S. authorized Ukraine to fire long-range missiles at targets in Russia.
Of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. Yesterday, I also spoke.
The Kremlin has stated that the option of freezing the conflict in Ukraine does not suit Russia, though it reiterated that President Vladimir Putin remains open to negotiations. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov declined to comment on the U.S. Embassy's decision to close in Kyiv due to potential significant air attack, referring to the question of the Defense Ministry. The U.S. Department of State's Consular Affairs has reported that the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has received a warning of a potential significant air attack. The embassy will be closed, and U.S. citizens were advised to be prepared to shelter immediately in the event of an air alert. Several European embassies, including those of Spain and Italy, followed suit and suspended their activities due to the threat of a Russian strike. This comes a day after Ukraine used American-supplied ATACMS missiles to strike Russian territory. The Biden administration has approved Ukraine's use of U.S.-made ATACMS missiles to strike inside Russian territory, signaling a shift in U.S. policy and escalating tensions.
The Biden administration has approved Ukraine's use of U.S.-made Army tactical missile systems, known as ATACMS, for strikes inside Russian territory, making a significant shift in U.S. policy. The first reported use of these missiles, authorized by President Joe Biden 2 days prior, comes amid escalating tensions and strategic recalibrations in the ongoing war. For months, Biden has resisted Ukraine's requests for long-range weapons, citing fears of provoking a wider conflict. However, reports of North Korea deploying thousands of soldiers to support Russia prompt reassessment. The presence of these troops in Russia's Kursk region, combined with Moscow's intensified aerial assaults on Ukraine's infrastructure, shifted the administration's stance. ATCMS missiles, with range of up to 300 kilometers, offer Ukraine the ability to strike deep into Russian territory. However, the limited supply of these missiles and their high cost suggest their impact may be more symbolic than transformative. Ukraine's increasing reliance on domestically produced drones, supported by US funding, has already demonstrated the ability to disrupt Russian operations. The decision has drawn strong reactions. Moscow labeled the move as direct US involvement in the conflict, warning of tangible consequences. Russian strikes on Ukraine have intensified in recent days, with devastating attacks on energy grids and civilian areas. Meanwhile, China's President Xi Jinping has urged global leaders to seek a political resolution, highlighting the war's growing international implications. As Biden's decision underscores U.S. support for Ukraine, questions remain about its long-term effect on the battlefield and the potential for a broader escalation.
Moving on to economy, according to recent official data, inflation in the United Kingdom surged to a 6-month high in October, exceeding the target set by the Bank of England. The Office for National Statistics reported that higher domestic energy bills pushed consumer price inflation up to 2.3% in October, compared to a 3-year low of 1.7% in the previous month. Persistent inflation in the service sector, which makes up about 80% of the British economy, also contributed to the increase. This unexpected rise in inflation pushed the rate to above the Bank of England's target of 2%. Iraq's fuel oil exports are set to reach record highs in 2024, surpassing 18 million metric tons, driven by increased shipments in October. The surge comes as domestic demand eases and production rises, supporting Iraq's oil revenues despite stagnant crude exports due to the OPEC Plus production caps. The boost in fuel oil exports, primarily high sulfur and straight-run types, will help ease elevated prices in Asia and lower refinery feedstock costs. October alone saw a record 2.15 million metric tons exported, with major destinations including Singapore and India. World stocks have a mixed performance as investors worry over escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine. In the United States, early trading, the future for S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average were up 0.3%. In Europe, Britain's FTSE 100 rose 0.1%, Germany's DAX added 0.6%, while the CAC 40 in Paris traded 0.5% higher. In Asia, the Nikkei 225 slipped 0.2%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng edged 0.2% higher. The Shanghai Composite gained 0.7%, and South Korea's Kospi added 0.4%. Oil prices were stable. Brent crude futures for January were up to $73.42 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were flat at $69.39 per barrel. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein holds a press conference in Beirut citing progress in ceasefire talks. The Palestinian presidency condemns Israeli media reports about plans for a buffer zone in northern Gaza. And the U.S. Secretary of Defense announces new military aid package to Ukraine. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Q News EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.